materials for tonight. Testing, testing. Can you all hear me? Testing, testing. Can y'all hear me? Testing, testing. You're good to call to order. Yeah. Hello, can y'all hear me? Kelly, if you want to, has he started the live stream? Can we? Hello, can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we can. Can you hear
Okay,
us?
good. Yeah,
Have you started the live stream?
I have.
You have? Okay. Kelly, if you want to call it to order, you can.
All right, we're calling it. We're calling the Tuesday, April 16th Planning Board meeting to order. We have a quorum. We are missing Bob and,
That's it.
is that it?
Austin's online.
And Austin, yes, but he's not a planning board member.
Okay.
Yeah. And we don't need to do, we don't have anyone else but Austin on, so we don't need to do the participation because he already automatically gets to participate.
Yeah, just make sure all your mics are on when you're speaking, especially since Austin's online and for the live stream, so for minute purposes.
Can you hear us okay, Austin?
I can.
You want to share where you're at?
I'm at home. I just was not feeling that well today, so I thought better to do my job from here than get anyone sick.
Well, your home looks very Caribbean, so that's nice.
This is my little patio, so my little piece of paradise.
All righty, let's see, we don't need remote, so adoption of the agenda. Everybody good with the agenda? If anyone wants to make a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second, anyone?
Second.
All in favor? All right. Second, okay. Public comment, I don't believe we have anyone for public comment.
There was
You
nothing.
need to do the previous minute.
There was nobody signed up. I
Oh,
already let-
previous minutes, sorry. Has everyone had a chance to review the previous minutes? Any questions, comments, or concerns? Changes?
No.
All right, I'm not going to ask who didn't review the previous minutes. All right, if we could get a motion to approve.
Motion to approve as the previous meeting minutes as presented.
All right, and all in favor? Aye. All right, so moved, thank you. Now, there is no public comment. Anyone signed up for public comment? So
No.
we are going to go straight into our UDO discussion and turn the floor over to Rick.
Real quick before we dive in, so you guys should have a completely new Article 8 in front of you. You should have replacement pages for Article 10. It should be pages 51, 52, and 53. You should also have the first 2 pages of Article 1. You should have a draft statement of consistency and a draft zoning map. I know we also, all these are digitally, they were included in your packets, but Other than that, tonight's meeting is pretty much the final one. It's anticipated that you guys will make your recommendation to the village council for adoption tonight. So tonight's the last opportunity for any comments, questions, recommendations. Hopefully there's not, I'm not going to say none, but not a lot. But other than that, I'll turn it over to Rick.
Thank you, Hunter. Thank you, members of the board. And Austin, can you hear me okay, Austin?
Dan, I can hear you loud and clear.
The statement of consistency is a single one-sided page that you should have there with your packet. The best place to keep that is right at the front of Article 1, if you'd like, because it is a prerequisite to adopting any type of land use ordinance, whether it's a rezoning or a text amendment, much less a entire new development ordinance. The statement of consistency is something that we'll want to come back to at some point, but just to tell you a little bit about, there it is. So I'm going to back up and digress a little bit from that, because that's really the last thing we'll need to do, presumably tonight. Before that, as Hunter pointed out, there were some revised components, predominantly in Article 8 and the table for Article 8, a couple of other pages as well. But I wanted to start out by asking if there were any questions that anyone had about any of those refinements. We also have a large print of the map in case there are any modifications that we need to be able to precisely make that we can mark up. The other copy of that map goes into the record. So a lot of things that I have delivered to Hunter tonight are actually for the record that Austin will maintain from this process of planning board concluding its work, making a recommendation, doing notices for the public legislative hearing, and preparing for the village council meeting, which is on May 14th, where they will conduct their legislative hearing. So any edits, any changes, any final request?
I would like to point out, so yes, in Article 8 has the final draft with all the Heritage District incorporation into it. You also have the table. I know that we discussed the table pretty in depth at the last meeting. Rick, I know one was, for example, attached housing. Rick does have it on this table as a permitted use for the Heritage District, so this is a chance to discuss that, chance to recommend not having that in, as well as any other of those permitted uses that we discussed last time. I know that, I feel like you and council were pretty much on board. I got those comments to Rick, and all that's incorporated into the proposed table of uses.
I do have some questions, but because I have not seen the new 8, I was working off paper when I was reviewing, so can we just take a second to look at this? Or can we go over any major changes that were made? Can you just point them out so that, I don't know if that's possible.
Most of them were pretty minor changes. I have provided, and I don't think you have before you, the updated 8 that highlights those changes. I do not have a printed version. That's what I had emailed a couple of weeks ago, I guess it would have been, or a week or so ago. And if there's a way that we can call those up on the screen, then we can scroll through them. That email would have been March 5th, I believe it was. And then we can kind of run through it, because I've done what I usually do. I've highlighted those changes in blue. And so only the things that you'll see in just a moment, if we can call that up, are the things that changed. May I ask the members of the board, can you see on your screens what we see up here on this screen? Okay, very good. Because I'll be using that screen to sort of, and here we have the football game. Appalachian State.
So you want me to pull up the March 5th copy?
The March 5th version of, do we need the page on Article 1, Madam Chair?
I think we just probably need Article
Or just
8.
Article 8? Okay, let's just scroll through that until we hit blue. There you go. That was a thing. Keep going. It's, there we go. This is where we tweaked some of the language. That's your suggestions, okay, along the way. Anybody just speak up and stop us if we hit something.
Sorry. So I know this question is going to be asked by multiple people, so I just want to ask it now, because it's a little confusing, I think, in the documents. So do we allow duplexes and apartment complexes?
All right, they're two totally different questions, okay?
Right, duplexes.
Apartment complexes would only be allowed in a district that lists apartment complexes, which none of the property you have on your zoning map now includes that.
Right, so now,
But we have to speak to it,
Duplexes.
otherwise you have to
Yep.
round it off, which could have detrimental effects. So by speaking to it, putting it in a district, and then you deciding to or not to ever zone anything, that will limit that. Duplexes are a bit of a challenge, because duplexes are, if you're talking about just a home that's got a second kitchen type of duplex, a conventional duplex where maybe you've got a family member that has their own separate kitchen, things of that nature, we cannot regulate that. There are provisions, and I brought the statute with me, there are provisions that say we cannot define these rooms and things of that nature if it falls under the residential code for 1 and 2 family dwellings. So think about it this way. If we cannot regulate anything about the inside of that structure for 1 and 2 family dwellings, then whether we want to allow duplexes or not is not the point. The statute basically treats them one and the same as a house.
okay, so I think what is confusing is, and I get that, right?
Yeah.
Because we have a former board member who has, you know, an attached area of her home where her parents live.
Right, that's,
I absolutely get that.
Perfect.
And we allow accessory use dwellings. So but that's not a duplex.
Right.
So is an attached house a duplex?
an attached house is any, like 3-unit, 10-unit townhomes is typically what an attached house is. A duplex falls under a different code than the others do.
Okay,
A duplex and a single-family dwelling are essentially one thing. Now, if you wanted to divide it, let's say you wanted to build a building that had 2 mirror image exact units and divide it and sell one side and the other side, you would have problems because we have those setback requirements, so you cannot do 0 lot line in a residential area. So there are ways to keep that duplex tied together with your primary unit. So if it is, you know, if somebody wants to come up with something that just happens to look like 2 identical mirror image units, that's just what we might consider to be a less than creative design. Most of the things that fall under that secondary unit or that second unit are going to be relatives or something like that. One of my sons has one that they bought from an architect that had their parents in there. And they don't rent it out, they can't do anything, they don't do anything with it because it's integrated into the house, but it has 2 kitchens, has 2 this, has 2 that, type of thing. So that's my approach is a way to satisfy the statute, yet manage the concern at the local level at the same time. So a true duplex where you could sell each side, each unit, can only be done in the mixed-use neighborhood, a mixed-use district where you've got those smaller lot sizes where you can do a 0 setback, where you can do the division of those units. In a standard residential area, let me just be clear, in a standard residential area, a duplex is going to be under 1 occupancy or ownership. It's one thing. We just can't regulate whether they have 1 or 2 kitchens. And kitchens used to be the measure before the statute was changed in defining, is it a 1-family dwelling or a 2-family dwelling?
so, all right, so because there's a lot of talk, so there's duplexes in here and then
That's right.
There's language called a multifamily.
That's apartments. Whether they're rental or condos, that's apartments, but those are not listed in our normal residential areas. Those are limited to the mixed-use type of districts, things of that nature, and if you don't apply it, then you don't have that. That's the best way to control it. If you just leave it off of your list, what's the closest thing to a residential unit that has a bunch of units? It's a residential unit that doesn't have a bunch of units, which means that somebody could argue that if we have to round this off to the closest thing, well, these houses are the closest thing, so apartments are allowed in these other districts. So it's important to list the things you want to control and then put them in districts, and don't put those districts on the ground unless you want to do that, unless that's a deliberate action. So no, you can't sneak apartments, you can't sneak townhomes into the districts that we have on your zoning map.
So to kind of clarify, what I have pulled up is the table of uses that you guys were updated with tonight. You have it broken out as dwelling, multifamily 8 units or less, which is allowed with additional standards in 4 districts. Those 4 districts are the traditional neighborhood overlay, the Main Street, the mixed use, and the mixed use 1 and 2. On the zoning
None
map.
of those are on the map.
Correct. On the map that you will see here shortly, no properties are zoned that. Any person wanting to do any of those would have to go through the rezoning process. Multifamily apartments or condos that are greater than 8 units are only then limited to the 2 mixed-use districts, which once again are not on the map. So just
Okay, because that was what was, okay, so thank you, because that was what was actually confusing, because when we first started talking about the Heritage District, for you, mixed-use district was getting thrown around a lot, and so the Heritage District actually had 2 mixed-use districts in it, and so when I hear that, I was thinking Heritage District, but I understand, yes.
Heritage District is a completely
Completely
separate
different.
district from the mixed use or any of those that I just listed.
My brain was still hanging on to that verbiage, and so,
Rick, one other question I have regarding the conversation with one family and 2 family, quote unquote, duplexes. Can you regulate that based off a district by density per our zoning standards?
Yes, it is regulated by density. If you look at your individual districts, let's just pick one. Let's just say the single-family residential 1, which sets a standard of 1 unit per acre. Does everybody want to sort of follow along? If you'll look in Article 8, and you'll look at page, looks like 8.
8 and 9.
Page 8. Page 8. Now, page 9's got these little tables, and it's got some setbacks and things like that, but that's not where, you don't want the fast answer, you want the correct answer. So if you look on page 8, where it starts out, single-family residential districts, SFR 1, 2, and 3, if you come down to D, gross density, which does not include the accessory dwelling that has to meet that little small footprint relationship and all that, there it is, SFR 1, 1 unit per acre. So if you're going to do a duplex, you need 2 acres to put your duplex on. You follow me? So what I'm getting at here is, as I explained before, we have to follow the statute, but we have other tools that are still valid tools to control it, and basically put a rezoning in the path of multifamily, a rezoning in the path of commercial, a rezoning in the path of a lot of the uses that people are concerned about. If we don't put them in the table and we round off, then we're going to wake up one day having wished we had done it differently. That's why I do it this way. So it's clear. This is not in that district, that is. So it's clear. When the decision is made, when Hunter has to issue a permit or deny a permit, the answer is clear. It's not ambiguous, like, well, the ordinance is silent. And I'll give you a quick example. I'm dealing right now with a scenario in a town where an ordinance was totally silent on a use. I won't dive into the uses unless you just want to hear about food truck, but it was totally silent on it. And now it's going to the to the Superior Court. because someone had, this was pre my ordinances, someone had set up a food truck in a location, there were complaints coming in. By the time their new ordinance was adopted, it had standards for it. And they tried to claim that they were grandfathered in, but they drove the truck home every day, which stops and starts a temporary thing. It's not like a house that stays there whether you're asleep or at work. It went home every day. So now they're actually appealing to Superior Court on that interpretation. But the whole problem is because the previous ordinance was silent on the issue. So they're trying to claim what you might call grandparent clause rights under the old ordinance, simply because it was never spoken to. So those are real-world battles that we fight out there, particularly in this more litigious environment that we're in now. So I try to shore you up so it's clear when he makes a decision, it's clear that here are the districts where that's listed, and it's not listed in your district. So there's a rezoning. If they go for the rezoning, then you make a recommendation in any which way you would like, and the council makes a decision in any which way they would like. It puts that in the path, that legislative action, which is your most powerful tool for just making decisions subjectively. Do we like it? Do we not like it? Are we comfortable? Are we not comfortable? That's a legislative authority that the village council enjoys. Sorry for the long answer, but
You're good. And so I see Kelly look,
Sort of to wrap up, though, the duplex situation. And I think you said that, on 8.4-2D.
D is in David.
Now, but the broader, is the rental, one owner who rents both of them out.
We cannot control that under Fair Housing Act. The only thing that can control that is an HOA. The town has to stay out of that business, or there are implications at the federal level on that.
But
But there are short-term clauses,
There are short-term rental clauses like
Yes.
Airbnb, things of that
But you
nature.
were saying that, the duplex started off with, family and parents or whatever, one
Right.
ownership, that was okay. But now you're talking about one ownership, but two rental units is.
They can do that.
But being on
We cannot
2
control that.
acres
Yeah,
with
I'm
duplex
talking
is
about,
a
would it have to
not
be on 2
cost
acres to do
effective.
that?
Yeah.
Yes.
and
2 units is 2 acres.
yes, I also want to add, because I know we have SFR2 and SFR3, and I know that you were looking at the zoning map, and we'll kind of hit on this here in a sec, but I just want to clarify for you guys, the record, whatever, is that, yes, there are properties in Marvin that are zoned SFR2 or being proposed to be zoned SFR2 and SFR3. Those are in existing neighborhoods. They're not existing vacant lots that this could be done at. These are existing neighborhoods that are zoned SFR, or that has been proposed to be zoned SFR3 and SFR2 based off of the minimum lot size, setbacks of the existing structures, all that stuff. So I just want to go ahead and clarify, and we'll get to that map here in a second, but I just want to at least let you guys know since we're talking density on that.
All right, we think we've built you plenty of defensive mechanisms in here, but you've got to stay in bounds of your authority when you're exercising those. They cannot be subjective, like looking up there and saying, well, it doesn't say, so that means that you can't do it. That's not the case. If it doesn't speak to it, then you find the closest thing to it, and that's the answer.
So
Okay.
I think it's now, for me, it's just the traditional neighborhood overlay or development overlay that is slightly confusing because this map is like microscopic. I
There's
know.
not any on the map.
It's
The
listed on
traditional
the map.
neighborhood development overlay?
Every single district's listed on the map, but not every single district's actually mapped.
Represented?
Yes.
That's right.
Okay, so I think that is slightly misleading for, I'm playing devil's advocate. If it's listed here, people are going to assume it is somewhere on this map.
We have to
So-
establish a symbol for it, and this map is actually a page of the ordinance. It's not just an exhibit.
Got
It's
it.
actually a page of the ordinance, so we give everything an assigned color code that works through the GIS systems, it works through all those pieces. In fact, if you look at that TNDO language in the Article 8, it's not something that you can apply anyway. Okay? That is something that requires the developer to petition so that they have requested the higher development standards. Okay? That's why it's done that way. So you couldn't go drop a TND on the map anyway. The town can't. That requires them to do it so that they apply for that standard.
Yeah.
This is not playing with, it's trying to blow in the wind with the direction that the statutes have gone, where they said that the only way you can establish higher residential standards on a typical house is if the developer agrees. So if we have a tool in the toolbox, the TND, where if you decided you wanted to do a little Burkdale, I'm just gonna make up something, then, and they applied for that district, then they have just agreed, and it says it in a couple of locations, they have just agreed to that higher standard. So that's the only way you'll ever get the higher standard applied to a district higher than what the statute allows for us to do by right. And I've got that statute, so I can review that with you if you so choose, things that we cannot touch, okay, unless they
Things
agree.
that we cannot touch, that we have, the planning board has no control and would never vote on.
So in this.
No
case-
bluffing.
So in this case, you're saying that it defaults to more restrictive.
That's right. The TNDO, if anybody wants density, here's the trick. Let's suppose that that Burkdale was coming to town. I'm just gonna pick out something, okay? Let's suppose that Burkdale was coming to town, and you really like the idea of having somebody come in and pick up a project and do it in a certain location that we've never thought of before that would be perfect, okay? And you needed that tool in the toolbox, there it is. It doesn't hurt you to have the tool in the toolbox, there it is. But they have to follow certain things. Their plan is a part of the zoning, all these details are part of the zoning. I've got a TND going on in another town right now that'll be voted on probably next week, where they've got all these higher standards and everything that they've had to submit and comply with and what have you. So it's a good tool to have in your toolbox. You don't ever have to use it, but if you don't have it, you're at a disadvantage. So if you ever get coerced into trading density, trading off some density, swap it out for quality. That's what the TND does. It says, you want that density, Mr. or Mrs. Developer, you're going to give us a much higher standard of quality as part of that deal. And it's in the ordinance. It's not just the board saying we want that or making it in the form of a motion. It's literally ordained in your ordinance.
Can I ask a question about, can I ask a question about the, it's hard to figure out what, in the legend of the map, some of the areas around the borders of Marvin have this, what looks like a vertical dashed line. Is that common space? What is that? Yeah, so like all of these spaces, so here, but I can't, I don't see a vertical. Common open space. But that looks like dots.
On the boundary.
Yeah, I've also got a,
We have a bigger map here. The dots, I see what you're talking about.
Oh, actually, can I?
Those are the, let's see here. That's the common area. Let me show you.
it's me. What you need me to zoom in on?
Oh, you've got it? Oh, never mind.
That is this common area, common open space.
That's what you said, vertical common open.
I tell them to make bigger dots.
Well, not that, I'm just saying, that's a dot and that's a dash. So I was looking at this, I would not know, I would not associate those two things.
I'll coordinate that with him on here. What that's intended to do is it's intended to say, okay, when you, let me get back to the microphone so that Austin doesn't throw something at me from over there. So, Madam Chair and members of the board, whenever you have a common area, a common open space that is exacted from a development, a new subdivision that belongs to the HOA, On a traditional zoning map, it just shows up as whatever that color is. Say it's this yellow or that green for whatever the district is. But over time, if you're not careful, that can actually creep away from the administrative process and something happens. We do that coding on it so that it basically is known as this can't go anywhere without being evaluated against the original plats or the original approvals. Like if somebody wanted to divide something in there or build something in there, that sends you back to that. Now, you might think, and I've seen maps that just put the common open space in a symbol and didn't have it in a zoning district. That's actually not consistent with state statute. State statute requires that 100% of your territory, except for road right-of-ways, be zoned something. So that's why we use a symbol. So it is basically part of the SFR3 or part of the SFR1, but it's essentially a no-touch area from the standpoint of new buildings or anything that, unless the approval calls for maybe the clubhouse or the golf course or the pool or something for the neighborhood in there. But I will make a note of that symbol and have him increase or decrease one of the two. Either it'll all be dots or it'll all be that little vertical dash.
And Kelly, you also, like, this map is blown up. We'll have a digital copy on our website. We'll also have it mapped. Austin and I are talking about doing our interactive map. But from a public standpoint, if they look at it and be like, oh, because they're interpreting because that dot versus a dash type thing, they're still gonna have to come to me or whoever's in my position to get the applicable permits. And so,
And my question wasn't a procedural one. It was to cut off any questions the map might.
yeah, I mean, and like I said,
I mean, like-
I fully think that people are gonna have questions and not understand the map or what all of this coming together means. The staff's in the process of trying an FAQ. Like, in short, yes, we're rezoning properties, but I more call it reclassification of these properties because they're still residential. They're just being zoned to a new corresponding district per the new MDO. And it's just cleaning up the mapping of common open space and other stuff. And like I said, it's consistent with all the districts that we have proposed in Article 8. So it's not like really the only properties that are being rezoned from residential to something else is all the ones that are identified as civic. That's it. Like, all the other properties are just being zoned from the Marvin residential or the Marvin RUC to the corresponding SFR1, 2, 3, or rural residential district.
I'm just kind of curious, Marvin Heritage District, why do you have a couple of them in there as SFR2s?
It's just because that's what the corresponding district that it fits based off the existing structure and the size footprint of that. So that's, like, once again, it's SFR2 because it's a corresponding residential district. And then if
It
it's,
doesn't meet the requirement, it doesn't actually meet the requirements of
Especially with one of them, it's
one home per
less than an acre.
Yeah.
it's only, but every property that's on SFR2 already has an existing house on it. Once again, every single property that is on SFR1, 2, and 3 all should have existing structures on them or part of an existing neighborhood. So, and this is something we call, and this is what Rick was getting to, was like, in your guys' proposed Article 8, the printed copy, if you go to page 9, which is the dimensional standards, and I'm going to go to page 9.
But here's the thing, you cannot designate something already in the Heritage District.
Because it's
The
conditional.
village council cannot and you cannot. You can identify the area, but because the Heritage District is a conditional zoning district, right? Only the property owner can do that. We cannot go out and drop a conditional district anywhere. The property owner has to do it, so there may be those lots that are within the bounds of the eligibility area, is what I call it for the Heritage District, that are straight up SFR2 because that's what they are today. Now, if somebody applied for that to become something more, then it would have to follow the Heritage District standards. But what's there today, if there's a house on a lot, as Hunter was saying, if there's a house on a lot and it's SFR2, then it's SFR2, and those are the setbacks if they wanted to add a carport or something.
Last question for now. So the property, it's technically 2 properties, 3 parcels, that's SFR1 that's behind me. So normally that would be rural residential because of their acreage, so did that already go through?
No, but it's a vested project. They've already got an application, all that stuff, so I'm not going to then zone them rural residential and then have a non-conforming subdivision that started prior to the MDO being adopted.
But isn't there a property that's next to them that is not, don't they have acreage? That is not part of that project? It's an existing home, it's their neighbor.
Kelly, I would have to look at it. I want to get through Article 8 before we get to the details of the map.
Okay, sorry.
So getting back to Article 8, what I have pulled up on the screen is the copy that you guys were presented at the March meeting to compare it to the changes that is printed out and you guys were provided tonight. In short, what was done in the SFR 1, 2, and 3 was basically we basically amended the setbacks in 1, 2, and 3 to comply with existing structures and neighborhoods that are being zoned those corresponding districts. Prime example is Weddington Chase. Weddington Chase is currently zoned RUC. RUC is that vested district that states whatever's on the plat is what their setbacks are. It's hard as heck to administer. So we're zoning them SFR3 because their minimum lot size per the plat is 15,000 square feet, 5-foot side setbacks. It's like 25 on the front, something on the rear. So that's basically what was updated in this Article 8 was those setbacks. That's why then originally I didn't think we'd have an SFR3, but Weddington Chase's minimum, not all the lots are that, but some minimum lots are 15,000 square feet. So that's the closest district that makes sense to have them zoned. It's pretty much any properties that are zoned RUC in their current zoning map are being zoned SFR3, just because they're smaller.
I thought you were getting rid of Main Street.
We discussed that. It's just being kept as a tool in the toolbox because it's something different. Once again, I don't really foresee it, but it's to have in there.
Okay.
Just since we have the Heritage District as a specified area, you never, some might happen and then we might change where our Main Street's at. I don't know. Just having it in there doesn't hurt.
If you look at the draft of Article 8 that you have in your notebooks today, you'll see on page 9 there the most recent versions of some of those setbacks in the SFR 2 and 3 that are a little different than what's on your screen right now, too. In fact, there are some in the SFR 1 as well to make those consistent with a lot of the plats that you've approved or a lot of the conditions that are on the ground. So we're trying to preserve the investments people have made, not throw anybody under the bus, but to be as close as possible to what would be an ideal in there. That's why you may see a 12 up here, but we've changed it to a 10 because of the pattern in the predominant subdivisions that you see out there of that density. You'll see the blue is basically anything that's new in the April 16 draft. That's the one watermarked 16th of April 2024. So those are most of the changes.
Can you go back to page 9 for a second?
Yeah.
You see where all the blue changes are?
I'm sorry.
You see the blue highlights on page 9?
Yes.
See the line right below the last blue highlight? That was 84 in the yellow, now it's 8. But it's not in blue.
I want to see what I'm going to bring mine over.
Minimum corner lot. Just go down the line with the blues, and you'll see this. That was 84 in the yellow.
This one?
Yes.
Was 84.
Now it's 8.
Hunter, can you show that again? Bring that back up. On page 9, underneath accessory structures.
Yeah. Page 9 of Article 8. That's what I had come with. There you go. That 84 right above there where the cursor is, that's what I had brought to you before. We discussed that, and the request was to change that, to reduce that substantially for garages on corner lots, wanting them to, in some cases, to be able to be closer to the side street than what we had in there.
But didn't it also say that it had to be the same orientation as the house, so the,
We can't do that.
I thought I read
Now, if you've got a garage in the backyard or the side yard, if you're on a corner lot, you know, you may have the house facing one and the garage accessed off of a side street. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'm thinking of setbacks, if they have to be the same distance from the street.
The SFR1 did have it pushed much further back from the side street. So it would be over on the interior side of the backyard, if you will.
Rick, I think that just needs to be probably 25. I think that, based off the blue, because that's the accessory structures, and if you look at 8 is SFR1, and that's smaller than SFR2 and 3.
Right.
I don't think it needs to be 84.
So let me look at my notes here that we worked from. So I'm glad that the board member has noticed this. Let's take a very quick look here at my notes and see if I had a collapse that day. No, I don't have any notes on making a change to anything, so whatever, if that 8 is incorrect, tell me what that was what I was supposed to do there, because I don't see that I had any notes on changing it.
I think making it 25 would be consistent with what the side street is for the principal structure. I mean, because then you're still dealing with those kind of setbacks for any type of detached garage per se. And that would keep it in, like, if a house was 25 feet off, exactly 25 feet off, then that would keep that accessory structure in any form or fashion in line with the house. It can be a little bit greater, but I think our current ordinance states that the side street setback for accessory structures is the same as the principal, which would be 25.
Okay? Good catch. Thank you.
I mean,
Should be, yes.
if you want, yeah, I mean, if we want to do it 26.5, that does provide,
My recommendation is always that it be a little bit further back. That's the change that I made here. So make sure that if we adjust that.
I'm fine with 26.5.
Yeah, you'll notice that I typically set because a lot of times those accessory structures need to be past the plane of the principal structure to some degree, if somebody builds at the minimums. That's the thinking there.
So 26.5, I'm good with that.
26.5? Yeah, it pushes it back about 1.5 feet. Okay. Taking bids on this. Who'll give me 27? Okay. Any other catches on that? And that table was predominantly what was the biggest changes that you'll see. Table 8.1 at the back, sections 1, 2, and 3 are all updated to coincide with the comments we received back from the village. Then in Article 10, we have a little bit, a few little tweaks at the back. We did add the microbrewery, brewery or microbrewery standards that you used already.
Quick question.
Sure.
For rural residential, what was the minimum acreage?
Okay, let's go back to, in Article 8,
2.5. Okay.
that is on page 7. Article 8, page 7, the rural residential district appears first, then the SFR 1, 2, and 3. So it starts with your lowest density, then moves to your next higher densities. So you can see that it's 2.5 acres. Yeah. Now, the reason you want to go fairly high like that is if you get too close down to like an acre and a half and things like that, the next thing you know, you'll have subdivisions going in there that are that do not have a rezoning in the path. So that's the key there. If someone wants to just build a house on a large tract and have some horses or whatever, no problem. Someone wants to come in and do a whole bunch of acre lot subdivisions and you don't have a rezoning in the path, then basically if they meet the standards, they meet the standards. So this basically sticks a rezoning in the path of subdivisions that are going to be churning out 1 acre lots or, you know, conventional subdivision type development, puts a rezoning in that path of those major type projects. So that you can make decisions up or down on it. Because once it's zoned for a certain product or density or something like that, they have that right. They just have to meet the standards in whatever ordinance is. So don't speculative, I call it speculative zoning. When you go out and say, well, we got a bunch of farms over here, we'll go ahead and put some SFR1 on it, you know, then you start getting a bunch of subdivision plans coming in the door, and there's no throttling that unless you put the rezoning in the path. So I know it's quite a different, as we've talked about before, it's quite a different way of approaching your approval process, but the legislative authority is the best, most absolute way to regulate or throttle or pace growth and development in the village. To manage the growth, if you will. Well, that's everything that I have for you. Any more for me? I do have a map over here that is large enough for us to really get into the details if anybody has anything they want to check or what have you. But the map largely represents existing conditions. If it's a certain density subdivision, it's zoned that way. If it's a certain type of use, like a civic school or something like that, it's zoned that way, okay? And the larger tracts, the undeveloped areas, or the estates, those are all in that rural residential. Yes, sir?
You wrapped up? You're ready for any kind of commentary back and forth? Yeah. I've just got a question for you as far as, you know, you deal with a lot of municipalities in this, in this consulting. Are you familiar with HB 5 that's going on right now? Are you familiar with a little town called Summerville?
With who?
Summerfield?
Oh, Summerfield.
I'm just curious your
Problem
thoughts about
child
that.
town, yeah, that's a problem child town.
Right.
I don't track the bills unless I'm invited to the party. I don't track the bills that are pending because my code of ethics, basically, if that's the law, then that's the way I work. I don't get to make the law, and I do not lobby, okay? Some planners will track those bills and opine about whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. I feel like that's not my job.
Right.
So if HB 5 makes it through the
Yeah.
state.
I'm just curious about, things like that coming up with municipalities.
Yeah, but
what
when you
thought.
mentioned Summerfield, Summerfield has had some real challenges with, they've had a pending development ordinance now for about 15 years that has not been enacted. You know, I'm familiar with some of the stuff that's going on.
So they have not updated their ordinances within 15 years?
They've got all kinds of issues. I'll just say it that way. I don't want to get into that.
Right.
But-
Does that put them in this place?
Probably, yes.
Rock and Harper?
Either a combination of that or how those decisions are being made. The legislature I've said this before, the legislature has, it seems like over the past decade or a little less than a decade, become quite readily eager to fix things at the legislative level in Raleigh that flare up at the local level. For many, many decades, the legislature did not get involved in local debates. But now it's very common, if a project goes south out there somewhere, for us to see legislation that throws a pair of tube socks on it. And you know my opinion of tube socks. They fit everyone, but not anyone very well.
You want to explain to them what we're referring to? or-
I'd rather let you. I've got a bias on that one. I
You
don't
do?
want to, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a solution to a problem that shouldn't be a problem, so therefore don't give us a solution to something that's not really a problem, except in that one situation. But state statutes sometimes will come out and give everybody the solution for one place's abuses or problems. And that's what's going on there.
Okay.
Hey, Rick,
We're all going to get to pay.
All right, I'll just leave it at that.
I would like to go back to Article 8 with the Heritage District, because one other proposed change I want to run by you and the board. And it's on page 57 of the printed copy.
I'm sorry.
57. 57.
It rang anyway because it was one of my sons in my emergency priority contacts. I apologize, but it was not an emergency. It was just dinner time, FaceTime with the grandkids.
So in Article 8 on page 57, it's the open space matrix for the Heritage District. I know you and I discussed about potentially taking this out just because all of this stuff has to be kind of a part of a site-specific plan anyway. So here's my recommendation, and let me know what your thought is. Instead of taking that as a special use permit, can we just put S and do it as approved as part of a site-specific plan?
Which paragraph are we reading from?
So where it says open space matrix, and it says the matrix appearing below establishes permitted open space types and respective uses in this, for the sub-districts. The key immediately below indicates types
Right.
required. And I don't want it to be a special use permit, because that's, so do we want to just change, like, we can leave the matrix in, or we can just take it out? Or we can, if we leave it in, just change where it's, instead of a special use, just S is listed as part of a site-specific plan approval as part of the rezoning. You see what I'm getting at?
So not do a special use permit, but do the thing is, with a site-specific plan, you've got to be able to measure that against standards. And the same thing goes really with a special use permit, except it's a little easier to set connectivity. This is not a tool that I use this way, so bear with me for just a moment. I'm trying to get into Marvin thinking there.
While he's doing that, can I ask you, this is total side, it's pertinent, but if someone were to put a business or social enterprise that focused on park area, would they have to go through a different process? Like, not the Whitewater Center, but, you know, something like Whitewater Center, where it's like, it has an outdoor use, but you have to pay to get in.
That would then fall
Right.
under one of the permitted use, fall in the tables as one of those recreational uses potentially.
It'd be a commercial thing, too.
Yeah,
If it's
so
commercial.
we use the example, and Rick and I talked about this, like miniature golf. Like, we're not allowing miniature golf as a permitted use in the Heritage District, but if somebody were to do like a putting green, or I think Ballantyne, from my understanding, has like a few hole, like where it's, you can bring your own putter and you can mess around and it's open to the public, that would be open space, park type space, not commercial enterprise type space.
Okay, so say that one more time for me, sorry. It would be
Anything
considered what?
recreational opportunity that is for commercial purposes would then fall under a use for that, meaning like in the table of uses, there's recreational use and stuff listed, like I was using mini golf as an example, or golf course or whatever, like if it's, you pay money to do it, it becomes commercial use. What's in this table is basically anything that is part of open space of a heritage district rezoning that'd be open to the public, not for, and it wouldn't be any for any type of commercial purpose.
Now, I've not changed anything in this table, so there's my qualifier, bless you, except for the headings a little bit. That's it, just to make it consistent with the overlay approach that we're taking. So here is my recommendation. Because the Heritage District is an overlay in and of itself, because it is therefore a voluntary conditional zoning, meaning someone comes forward and applies for it, what I would recommend on these would be that it be part of that conditional rather than a special use permit.
That's what I'm trying to say.
So when you do if I come in and say, I want to build this phase of the Heritage District over here, and I do want the amphitheater, I'm just going to pick something out of the list. I do want the amphitheater, and it's a conditional district, but it's legislative, but you guys are really nervous about me and my amphitheaters. Okay, so guess what? You just vote no, and if I say, well, gosh, what's wrong? I thought you loved everything. Say, well, that amphitheater made us nervous, so I go back to my conditional zoning application and say, I'll withdraw the piece about the amphitheater. I'll kill that from the list of permitted activities in the park, and then you can approve the conditional district, and voila, there it is, rather than a special use permit. Special use permit should be used, as I've said before on more than one occasion, only for the scary stuff, because it's evidentiary. It's not subjective. Calling it a special use permit under your old ordinance was still keeping it in that apparent subjective area, like, well, I don't want an amphitheater, I'm going to deny it. No, they have the right to do it. If it's a special use, they have the right to do it. All they have to do is meet the standards for it and submit evidence that they meet the standards. Then you pretty much still have to issue the permit. You can't, special use permits are not extra authority. They're just a different process. Usually the evidence is required to demonstrate you are mitigating a real concern. And if your concern is the farmer's market or the amphitheater, what is that mitigation? I would make it part of just a part of it, and then just deny the conditional zoning. And if they change it to eliminate the amphitheater and then submit the amended application, then voila, you've done away with the amphitheater. And not had to go through evidence and sworn testimony and, raise your right hand and left hand on the Bible and all of that, just to approve a plan.
So, but you were asking whether or not the open space should just be allowed and
So
not
we
have
have
to go through
open
rezoning?
space minimums, the amount of like the development's supposed to provide X amount of open space per their heritage district submittal and all that stuff. This table was in the original form-based code. Rick and I talked about just taking it out and more of actually putting it in the small area plan and as a guide. But I don't, if we're gonna leave it in here, I don't wanna leave it as a special use permit for certain of these, just because that complicates things. If it were ever to happen, I think what my intent was is basically where it says S, is it's basically part of that site-specific conditional approval. Where, for example, and Rick, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but like if somebody were to come with that site-specific plan for a heritage district rezoning, and they had I'll use the heritage park that was donated to the village, the 2.5 acres, then if it says P or R or whatever, then it would be, we could do any of those amenities on that site after the fact. I mean, it's part of the rezoning. It's basically just a blanket open space. There's not a site-specific plan of what is going on there yet. But if we were going to do an amphitheater there, or that was what was originally proposed, that would be a part of the original conditional zoning. So then if it's not going to be an amphitheater, they would have to come back and amend their conditional approval to either be something else or take it out.
So I would change all the S's to Ps, because a special use permit is permitted. It just has to meet, based on evidence, all the factors you're concerned about, and there are no factors that you've shown that you're concerned about. So in your old heritage form-based code, you were requiring a special use permit, but providing no foundational guidance for that special use permit. So that means it was subjective.
Yeah,
So
no,
I would
get-
just list it as permitted and then kill it in the conditional zoning if you don't feel good about it.
Were you talking about the 2.5 acres, the ones that, like, right over here, like, adjacent to this property?
No, I'm talking about the 2.5 acres that was donated or being dedicated to the village as part of the Jones Holmes Heritage Development.
There was
That,
an amphitheater being proposed?
no, there was not an amphitheater being proposed on that site.
Oh my God, I thought that's what you said.
I was using
I thought
that as
just
an
what you- I was
example
like,
of the uses. I mean, and this, like, we have a use table already too, that some of this kind of like falls into. But this is one that I call that I'm like, because I know we're gonna have some Heritage District rezonings applications submitted once this thing's adopted, and I don't want, this is one of the confusing things, and I'm like, we don't want special use permits because we don't have any standards. That's an extra step. It creates challenges on staff. It creates, I mean, potential legal challenges as well. So we can, yeah.
If you want to make it simple, change the S's to Ps, because the S's mean they're permitted, they just have to meet and show evidence that they meet whatever the standard is, and there's not a standard specifically for a special use permit on a farmer's market or an amphitheater. Otherwise, those would appear in Article 10, where we have addressed all the special uses that have real concerns, pollution, noise, those kinds of things. So I would make those Ps where they're S's, and then at the rezoning level, if you are uncomfortable with the fact that they are doing an amphitheater or a farmer's market or a dog park or something like that in a particular area that says it's permitted, then vote it down and tell them your concern, and they can amend their condition on the spot. They can actually say to Austin right then, we want to amend our application to omit that from this list in our specific conditional zoning. And there you have it. It's problem solved without a separate, entirely different quasi-judicial proceeding.
What's HDMU again? So many freaking acronyms.
We've tried to keep the Heritage District as intact as possible, but there are some things in it that are a bit awkward, and that's one of them.
Makes sense.
But we don't have mixed use in the Heritage District. But they could request zoning for that.
Only in a designated area, yeah.
And so currently S means special use permit and P means permitted?
Right, permitted.
By permit?
Permitted means it's permitted by right, but it's a conditional zoning process, meaning you can say, we're uncomfortable with that, and the developer says, well, we'll take it out. You mark it up right then in writing, and it's out. Then when you vote on it, it would not be permitted anymore. That's what conditional zoning does, but the developer has to agree to that if you want to change that.
So, but why permitted at all? I mean,
That-
I guess it's just a tool in the toolbox again? I mean, like,
No. This is not me right
Like
here.
I said,
I can't answer any questions about that list right there. I had
that
nothing
was
to
in the
do with
original
that.
form-based code.
This is
In
this
a-
is what's in your ordinance now.
In a way, in my opinion, and I'm not trying to complicate the draft, but basically, you could take out that whole open space matrix, you could put it a part of a plan where we can get into kind of more finer detail of like what we want to allow, or I mean, what we would like to see where and what, and what part of, or what type of development in the Heritage District. But this just complicates it from, I don't know. Trust me, I don't even know why we had an open space matrix of permitted special uses and stuff like that anyway.
The way it appears in there right now is the law of the land in Marvin today. and I was asked to keep that district, and anything that was kind of like a zoning thing, we kept in here. So this is not anything I'm recommending at all. I mean, I was not part of formulating the strategy for that. That was something, to my understanding, that the community worked hard and chose and wanted and was adopted. So right now, this would be a change to what you have in the current Heritage District form-based code, okay? I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying if I were writing it and bringing it to you, that particular provision, because that is a carryover provision, I would recommend not using the special use permit for these relatively simple things that you can make a decision about as part of the conditional zoning, because the Heritage District is a conditional district in the new ordinance. So you have the ability to basically negotiate that right out of it before you vote to approve it, whether it's at your level or whether it occurs at the village council level.
And so the things that are in this currently, where in the UDO does it address how these things are regulated? So like.
Nowhere. That's come right from your form-based code.
Okay,
Your form-based code doesn't. It says it this way in your current form-based code.
so I have a problem with that, because if an amphitheater could be put anywhere and be directing sound.
Not anywhere, the amphitheater
Well,
can
no,
go
no,
in
but anywhere within these districts.
those 3 sub-districts, right. That's
Right.
right.
But
Well, they
there's
have to have a
no-
special use permit, but you have no criteria for the special use permit.
Right, no, I get your point about
Okay,
just making it part of the conditional rezoning.
that's the best way to
But-
do it.
My concern is then if we've got someone who comes to us and says, okay, we want to put an amphitheater on this half-acre lot right here, everything in terms of the zoning, they can technically apply for it. How do we as a planning board know how to even look at that and judge it based on, is this going to be a good fit? Like, what are the noise, I don't know the
Exactly.
first thing about how noise carries through an amphitheater.
Anything that says special use should have corresponding criteria. That's the way the part that I've written is. If you look at that Article 10, the second half of it, Article 10.2, is all special uses, and it's the criteria that goes with them. Then there might be an extra condition that you add because it's on a particular piece of property next to the school or something like that, where it's obvious that we need to work something out with the developer. But having a special use that has no defined parameters to it, what would the evidence be demonstrating? Because it's quasi-judicial.
Right.
So they have to submit a plan that says we meet all your criteria, but if there's no criteria, they come in and swear on the Bible that that they have no plan because there's no criteria, and you have no choice but to grant that approval.
And I totally get that. My
Yeah.
concern is not about the special use. My concern is we don't have any criteria, even if we put it under conditionals, like they have to ask for the rezoning and we have to approve it. I wouldn't even know the first thing about approving an amphitheater. So like as a council and as a planning board, how do you even approve something like that if you don't have the knowledge to judge it or value it or give it feedback? And I mean,
You're absolutely correct, Madam Chair.
The way I look at it is that it would be proposed as part of the rezoning. If it's not a good fit, as we kind of discussed, you don't have to approve the rezoning.
no, but it might be a good fit, though. I'm not saying that, I'm not saying like I oppose amphitheaters. I mean, I've been a performer all my life. Like, I love a good amphitheater, but I don't know how to judge it or give it, like, I couldn't approve it because I don't know anything about them. So like, if and when something comes up, because I know there was an idea of even putting like a little mini amphitheater like in the civic area. That's great, but like, how do we as a collective, what knowledge do we have about that type of stuff?
Okay, if that comes up, if we move away from this special use thing and we just rely on the best tool in your toolbox, the conditional district, that legislative action, then in the meeting, when I show you this plan, I'm gonna do this project in the Heritage District. Hi, my name is Rick Heritage. I'm doing a heritage plan, and I've got this amphitheater right here, and Madam Chair, you raised that issue. Then I'm gonna say, well, it's not gonna be loud, it's gonna be acoustic, and it's gonna be that. Yeah, there might be some amplifiers, and you say, but how do we know? Then I come back with, I say, well, let me get some standards and let me propose those standards to you based on maybe industry standards for outdoor music venues. And so you say, okay, we're going to continue this item until our next meeting at the next month, and I go back and I get somebody that produces some information to provide you with what that means. Now, your ability to review that report can be quite an issue too. Are you looking at decibels and things of that nature? Is that how it's going to be measured? Because if this is the trick, what you would probably need to do is decide that there would be no amplification or amplification only using a certain level of output or equipment, so that maybe there's a PA, maybe there are musical instruments with certain amplifiers, but you can actually define that in their conditional zoning, or get them to provide that as part of the conditions that would be added. So on a conditional zoning, you just slow it down until they've demonstrated to you, and you don't have to do it through evidence and sworn testimony. This is what I'll agree to. Maybe I agree to no amplification other than portable, like, a handheld little thing, that I can use, like at the auction at my grandmother's house or something like that. There are ways you can do it through the conditional tool far easier than you can if you are trying to issue something through an evidentiary tool. So that's how I would do these. Anything that concerns you in a conditional process, best thing you can do is send that applicant back to the drawing board to bring you some answers.
So, but is there a time restraint? Because I know like in certain applications, we have certain amount of days. We have 60 days or 90 days to take a vote, right?
That's right. Well, they can take it away from you if you appear to be stalling. That's built into the statutes. That's not something that we're just saying. The legislature has said, well, what if we get a overzealous planning board that wants to delay and delay and delay? They give the council the ability to take that from you and say, okay, after 45 days or 60 days or 30 days or whatever it is, and I'd have to look it up, that's in the statute, they can just call the matter off of your agenda and up to theirs. And that's a protection that's in there based on statute. That's not anything where we can say, well, you can have 6 months, to study something.
So would the example of small amplification have to be written out in some sort of development agreement? I mean, we've done.
It would be made part of the conditional zoning. It would be made part of the
Part of their
conditions.
zoning, okay, so it need, because I know that with Jones Homes, we verbally had certain agreements that did not end up in any kind of written form, and so we had no, so.
It needs to be in the ordinance creating the conditional district. That is the best way for you to be able to just say yes or no. Anything else, if it's not spelled out in detail, it's not spelled out in detail. So me saying this is going to be the nicest place in town, I can assure you, doesn't mean anything, okay? If I put into writing how it was going to be the nicest thing and we made it part of your conditional approval, there it is. And I don't know what an amphitheater's criteria should or shouldn't be. Really depends on this community, which might be quite different than another community.
And we have lots of.
I don't know if I've gotten anywhere in allaying your fears or not, but trust yourself and trust your staff on the legislative process. They're not going to steer you wrong. If they see something, or if you see something, just ask them to work with the developer to get some parameters that you can live with, and then get them to somehow demonstrate how that would work. For example, is there a certain wattage of amplification that would be the maximum? Well, you can see that on the label of the equipment, so it's enforceable. those kinds of things. It just, it's going to depend really on whether you even get, I mean, look at it this way, too. Look at where amphitheater shows up in that list. It shows up in what, was it 2 or 3 of the, in the list in Article 8 in the Heritage. It's in those 3 areas only, which are shown in Article 8 specifically. So that's the only places in town where they can even apply to do that amphitheater. That's on page 57, I think he said a minute ago.
58.
Yeah, 58. So if you compare those on page 58 to the information on page, let me get over to that. It starts on
Yeah, I'm just.
page 41, page 40. So if you look at that, you've got your sub-district standards for the residential only. So it's not listed in that one. So comparing page 40 and page 58, can't do an amphitheater, right? Because it's not in the RO. If you go on over to the MU, which is at page 41, those purple areas are the only places you could do an amphitheater in that one. If you turn the page to page 43, you've got it in the little red ones under the commercial only. And I doubt seriously you're going to get a commercial operator that's even going to want that option. I mean, to me, that's not a realistic even, provision. But it could. That would be the opportunity where it might be a commercial one. It might be a ticket price admission type of venue. It could be a little thing on the back steps of the microbrewery. I don't know. But that's the only areas in town, and that makes up about maybe 60% of the Heritage District at most, are the only places you could even do an amphitheater if it was financially viable. So some of your fear might be, it's valid, but it might be that there's only certain possibilities that it could even happen anyway.
Where most of the rural residential is. So
Pardon me?
it's where most of the rural residential is, so that was just my question, so.
But it wouldn't be permitted in the rural residential.
No, but
It's only in that
abuts-
portion of the
it
Heritage.
abuts the rural residential.
Well, I've done all I can do. I think you
I
beat me.
know, I
You
know.
got me, Madam Chair. I'm washed out.
But you know what, I'm just gonna keep fighting, because just can't, it's ridiculous. All right,
I still recommend that those S's be changed to P's, though, because if you're gonna lose if you try to regulate that through a special use permit, in my opinion. If you get challenged on it, you won't be able to get through that. If you don't get challenged, no big deal. But if you do, I don't feel that you can set a special use permit with no standards in play, because it is permitted, providing the evidence is there that they meet the standard, but there's no standard, so
it automatically gets permitted,
they
yeah.
got it.
Are you, Hunter, is that which direction you'd like to go? Is to move them all over to permitted, seeing that they're all in?
And
That-
while I'm changing them to Ps, you can get rid of it from one of those districts or more if you want to. While I'm changing S's, they could not reappear as Ps.
Yeah, I mean, if we had more time, my honest opinion would probably just be to scrap it and put it in a small area plan. Because I think you already have open space requirements in the Heritage District. We already have an open space section of the MDO. So in my opinion, I don't think it's necessarily needed. It's more of a guide of what we are looking for as part of Heritage District developments. And there's, on the back end of this, like, we're gonna be updating the small area plan, but I don't know from a, hey, quick edit standpoint, if just removing it makes sense. So the quick fix for recommendation would just to be permit them. Once again, it would be a part of a specific rezoning. And all these are kind of learning keys, like where if any of these proposed developments have just, like I said, a blanket open space park on their site plan, you can regulate through the conditions of that zoning that it can't be X, Y, and Z, and it's only can be, even though it says permitted, like that's part of the conditions that can be agreed upon and part of their approval. So, once again, permitting it doesn't mean it's just gonna happen. It still has to be part of go through the rezoning process and be a part of that approval for the most part.
It's to be part of the conditional zoning.
Yes, the conditional zoning approval for the Heritage District.
That's the best tool you'll have to manage growth in this village. It's the best tool.
Interesting you say that, because I know I asked you a question the last meeting, and what I asked you about has actually come to fruition, where last night the Charlotte Council decided to vote in that 24-acre spot over on Tom Short and Ardrey Kell. They were going to put 900 homes there. Well, actually, it was 900 homes consisted of single-family, townhomes, I think condos. They mentioned something about a middle school, too. I think they felt like they had some sort of obligation to do that. And I was thinking, holy cats, that's going to go all the way, if you're familiar with this area. And all I kept thinking was, as we're going through this, I'm thinking, what is, we've been talking about this Jones property, and I'm thinking, what is the city council of Charlotte doing when they're looking at putting 900 homes right there in the middle of already density housing, which is over there at the Ray Farms? I know we're talking about Mecklenburg County, so it has nothing to do with us. It's just talking about planning, and it's like, what is the thought process? Is it just the tax dollars? Is it revenue they would be getting in? It's just amazing to know how busy Blakeney area, between Blakeney and Providence Road will be. I don't know if you heard that.
I'm not
Some
familiar
of
with
it
that
is
particular
just
case, but that's
Lack
interesting.
of housing. Charlotte does not have enough housing for the amount of people that are coming in every day. It's crazy, like any corner lot now with their UDO, you can put a duet on it, a triplex, like any corner lot, any.
Well,
So,
housing, the city of Charlotte toyed with eliminating the single-family district entirely and just having development standards, but not districts that said single-family or 1 and 2 family only. They toyed with completely getting away with that. Doing away with that, and that's somewhat problematic. It really is, particularly if you're out on the fringe. And in their discussions, it was going to be city-wide or jurisdiction-wide, which would bring it all the way to your edge, which means you would have no ability to really say, well, we're not ready for apartments right up next to the rural area. Because to me, you really need to sort of work from the core outward. So your density works away from your center of town, whether it's a big city or a small town like I don't know, Monroe or something like that. You bring your density and you sort of support your core. And that's what Charlotte has done pretty well, but now they're going a little bit too far by going all the way through the periphery as well with it. They're going to compete, they're going to create competition for other areas within their own area. And that usually is where things backfire. When you're trying to have vital, let's talk about Buckhead in Atlanta. Buckhead in Atlanta was a concentration of higher density housing. Suppose that they had done that same zoning in a lot of places at one time, Buckhead would never have really happened. And so it would have undermined the viability of it. It's kind of like the market, if you will, supply and demand. If you oversupply the market with a product, and when you're a municipality, what is that product? It's zoning on property. If you were to go out and go ahead and zone a whole bunch of the green rural residential SFR3, it's going to explode on you overnight. There are going to be people lined up at the door. He's not going to be able to go home and go to sleep. It's going to be so busy. So you do control the market, contrary to a lot of elected officials' opinions that, well, we don't control the market. Actually, you do, because you control the supply side of residential product by controlling it through the zoning map. If you've got a hot area. You know, you're not way away and there's no real demand anywhere. But if there's demand in this area and you offer that supply, you're gonna see it happen. And that's kind of what they've done, is they have now oversupplied the market with too much high-density land that is going to create competition among areas, which is gonna create traffic issues and school issues and all kinds of things.
But
It's
they've
really not that
also
complicated.
overinflated the housing pricing because developers are coming in and buying up everything they can get their hands on, and people who just want to live in a house can't afford it anymore. So they've inflated all of the housing prices, and if you look at Zillow, there's hardly anything under $1 million, 1.5 million in, like, it's unbelievable. Like, even little houses that need to be torn down are starting in the fives.
Yeah, and
Game on.
I told y'all I've built a small house. It's not quite a tiny house. You know, we've had that conversation. I actually have a contract and it closes in a couple of weeks. This is a small house, 577 square feet at $396 a square foot. One bedroom, single floor,
Is that New York City?
downtown Kannapolis, across from the park. I wish I could do that,
All day long.
just cook them out.
It is interesting because, like, we're purchasing a property in Mecklenburg County. We're in the process right now, and I don't buy in Marvin. I just have my own home. I do my real estate stuff at other places in other counties. That's one of the reasons I know so much about it. But it's interesting that there are houses and properties that are going for like way more than any of our properties are worth, even though the houses like would fit in our garage. You know what I mean? Like, and so I've been looking at them with that perspective in mind of just like, this little tiny house is worth as much as my house on 4 acres that's only, you know what I mean? Like, and we
Yeah.
have a beautiful, I mean, like, who wouldn't want to live out here except for the distance? So it's interesting how what they're doing out there is elevating home prices, but they're actually, the quality of life is,
It's not elevated, it's.
well, the market is
Supply
dropping.
and demand is basically what it's doing. And it is right now, there's a low demand.
Well, but
I mean, low supplies.
they're taking they're taking homes that would normally be affordable housing, and they're knocking them down and putting up $2 million homes, so.
And
you know, so-
that's an interesting dynamic out there. This is a great discussion you're having, and I'm glad you're having this, because this is what we're trying, this team, your planning department, we're trying to prepare you for those pressures. Because look at the map. Those green areas are areas that are what we'll call underdeveloped, right? They're not full of lots of houses and subdivisions. They're pretty low density, they're underdeveloped. And the market will chase that underdeveloped property. That's what buying that house and paying a big price and still tearing it down and going back with something will do. And so I think what you're doing now in adopting modern standards that will brace you, because your history here has been some good development, and you've had a good handle on that. But I have a feeling that as the interest rates, I don't want to see them go down. I like where they are myself, because I'm a saver, not a borrower. So I kind of like it being there. And you do need that in the market. You need kind of a balance between that. But as the market gets used to those and kind of gets comfortable with, okay, we're back in the 5s now, or whatever it is, 6 or something like that. We're not in the 2.5s anymore. And the housing starts cranking back again and what have you. I think you're going to find yourself in the crosshairs, because you've got, you're close. I mean, you're right. You touch Charlotte and have large tracts of land. That is not common. And you're going to find yourselves, you're going to wake up one day and there's going to be people walking in his door, you know, standing in line to get to him, to talk to him about their project ideas, especially if something goes on the market.
I mean, it's happening now. I mean, that's part of the reason why the rural residential district was being proposed. just because you're seeing these 3 to 5 acre tracts going on the market, and people are trying to carve them up the best they can, and it's not a great product. And if they meet the standard, they meet the standard. And so that's why we did this. And like I said, it's just all these tools in the toolbox, and to have where there's at least a process in place that doesn't just allow development to happen. But it also then has these tools in the toolbox that if times change and other stuff happen, we have those tools if we need to. So,
Well, thank you.
And so I have a question for you. I need to ask the chair to, let's go back to this particular topic. Right now, I have 2 edits to make. I have a corner lot that I've got to change a setback on in an SFR1 in Article 8. I have a legend that I need to work on a symbol, have Tom fix the symbol on that map. And then I have a circle around a whole bunch of S's on page 58 in Article 8, and I need some direction from you as to whether we leave it, because that's what's out there today, or whether we fix it now, because there's no time like the present for me to go in and either change them to Ps, delete some of them, delete all of them, something. So my suggestion would be dog park. What parts of the Heritage District would you consider a dog park in at all? Right now, you have them in.
I think the minimum would be to change everything to P, and then could you, I know you wanted to do small
Change the
area-
S's to Ps.
Change the S's to Ps. I know you wanted to you'd prefer to do a small area plan, but if you don't have time.
well, we would, after this process wraps up, there's actually doing a greater Heritage District plan that builds off the small area land use plan for this district that was built in, but it's taken some of the narrative and stuff that we've taken out of the form-based code, adding it into that plan. Like I said, it can be done either way. At the end of the day, and especially this being on the forefront of your guys' mind, we can do them all Ps. My goal is to get the MDO adopted just so we can utilize all of it. I know that there's still some things in the form-based code, or in the Heritage District portion that still needs to be kind of fleshed out. It's basically clarification. This was one of them. But that's where luckily the process kind of protects it with the conditional zoning side of it. I think the simplest thing, so if we want to move forward, we can do it as a P, and we can bring this back up after everything's adopted. Because either way, it's already in the current ordinance either way.
See, I can make these, really right now it's 3 changes. It's the S's to Ps, it's the side setback on the corner lot, and it's the map table, and I can provide him with a new file tomorrow so we don't have we're on track with the village council. The biggest concern that I hear from Hunter, and I'm gonna underscore, I agree, is these other tools in the toolbox that you don't have today that you need in place, or right now we're letting those sit on hold while we work on things in the Heritage District, which is only a small slice of the overall pie. So I can fix this now. I can fix the Ps, the S's to Ps, and then you can leave it in there, or when you do your plan in the future, your small area plan, then you can say, let's yank this out of this now that we've got it covered somewhere else. Because you can still control it with your conditional zoning, which it's all required. The Heritage District is not an option except as a conditional district. So you've got that in place now. You are in place under this ordinance. You're set.
Yeah, so I think it's fine, just the simple fix is to S's to Ps.
Okay.
I'll make a note of it, and once the Marvin Development Ordinance in totality is adopted, tentatively at the May council meeting, then potentially at May Planning Board or June, we'll come back and we can maybe discuss this and also talk about the plan. There is one other change that I want to, like I said, get Planning Board's recommendation on, and it's the attached housing as a permitted use, kind of the same concept. It's in there as a permitted use for the Heritage District because it's
What kind of housing? Detached?
attached.
Attached.
Like townhouses.
Yes.
Townhouse.
Correct. This is what we discussed at the last meeting. I just don't want it to I'm not trying to slide it by you guys, whatever. If you guys don't want it as a permitted use in the Heritage District, now's the chance to make that last change, but it's still the same concept that it has to be approved a part of a specific conditional rezoning. So having that tool in the toolbox, as we just talked about the housing market and all this other stuff, if down the future it ever becomes a thing, I don't know. Like, what this is providing it, allowing as a permitted use right now is it can be proposed, it can be discussed. It doesn't have to be approved.
Right. So do you keep the tool in the toolbox, meaning it's sitting there for that project that comes along that is ideal, or if it raises concern, say, nope, we have concerns about the attached housing, and the developer says, well, I'm not gonna do that anyway, we'll agree to knock that off the list, then voila, it's fixed that quickly while they're standing here,
Right, but we could restrict it in an overlay.
in the
So-
conditional.
Yeah, that's what,
your
and that's
heritage
what it is.
overlay.
It's, that's where it's at right now. It's not,
Which one, is it an MU or CO or both?
no.
talking about
so
the heritage
It's just the
only.
heritage. Yeah.
Oh, so it doesn't, but it doesn't. Right, but the Heritage District has four different,
Right, you have the CO, you have the.
Those sub-districts are in there, but you're still resorting to the base, the overlay of the Heritage District. It's still the same process. Those classifications are more of the future, of the land use kind of designation specific on those properties as identified in the small area plan. To clarify, if we leave attached housing in here as a permitted use for a Heritage District, this does not mean that a previous rezoned property that has already been approved to the Heritage District then can switch up their site plan and their original approval to allow for townhomes. They would have to come back and do the same process again to amend their original approval. So this isn't just, you're not gonna see it just happen.
And keep in mind, it would not be, there's 4 sub-districts to the Heritage District, so the commercial only is not gonna have any residential. Doesn't matter if it's townhomes or, attached, detached, anyway. The Civic's not gonna have that. It would only be the mixed use and the residential, and your residential's already been approved. So the only real exposure is in potentially that little mixed use piece of the Heritage District, which is like that big on the map.
yeah, but there's only like 1 or 2 lots that it could even go on, and that's not really transitional density, so.
And you can always kill the conditional
I'll-
zoning.
I'll be honest, and I know that it's old, but people did not want townhomes in Marvin when they took the survey, and it's been some years. So, and I know we had a former planning board member who liked the idea of, aging in place, and there was no, like, people don't, when you're over a certain age, you don't want to take care of a 4,000 plus square foot home and acreage and whatever, and I totally get that. I don't want to take care of it now. But at the same time, it's like, so how do you balance what we heard back then with what we don't know now?
Well, and the balance is the process. The process of a property owner or it's his or her designee as a developer applying for rezoning. If they propose townhomes as part of their approval or as a part of their plan, we don't have to approve it.
Yeah.
And at the same time, if it's not proposed as part of their plan, just so there's no discrepancies in the long run, you then make that a condition and they agree upon it, because most likely it's going to be they're either going to propose or they're not. It's not going to be like, hey, we're thinking about it. Like, they're going to go for it or they're not. And all because it's like, all that is allowing is potentially, it sets us up for the future. You never know what the diverse housing market's going to look like, what the opportunity is going to be. But it doesn't mean it has to be approved. It still has to go through the process where you guys, as the planning board, will be reviewing those applications, making a recommendation to council, reviewing that with the land use plans and inconsistencies and consistencies. It also then goes to the village council, and the village council can, vote to deny it, vote to approve it, just depending on where we're at in life. My goal with this whole MDO is to have every single tool to set us up for long-term, where it's not like our current ordinance where we're trying to put Band-Aids over Band-Aids over Band-Aids because things have been just disregarded or not ever thought about, because I think planning is a long-term vision. And that's what I'm just trying to make sure that we have.
The Heritage District requires a site plan because it requires a lot of design stuff, and they can't show that to you without doing the site plan. So once you've tied that site plan to that conditional zoning, they can't pull a bait and switch on you.
Right.
They'd have to go back to the drawing board, literally, and bring you an amended, just like a rezoning. We want to rezone and to change, they have to go through the whole thing again. We want to rezone to change our conditions, then, you know, that's how it would go. And then you can deny it if it's something you don't want.
And I
They
brought
can't
this
pull the switch on you.
I brought this up before, and you keep on saying townhomes, and the townhomes gives the visual of two-story. Not all townhomes are two-story.
That's right.
Okay?
Those
Yeah.
are 3.
Well, some are single,
Exactly, or 1.5.
yeah.
So I'm just throwing that out too.
Yeah, and, but it's not that, it's that, you know, if we leave it in, right, we do not have a central understanding of where this, because I think it could work on certain properties with certain situations, but not just anywhere in the Heritage District. But none of us have actually sat down and said, where do we think this could work? Where would it make sense? We don't have common language, we don't have common vision, and so like just leaving it in without any type of consensus on where this might work, I feel like could lead to some issues later on.
But that's where that, like I said, I've told you guys plenty of times before, like our overall land use plan and the small area plan need a lot more detailed work. Those, in theory, when the village adopted their 2020 land use plan, like that should have been done at that point. You do kind of prioritize and speculate development. And some of that was done for the Heritage District. Some of that, we had that committee, we had the small area plan. So it was done in short, but like, that's your chance. I mean, and that's where we can sit down after this, like, because once again, in the forefront and after this thing's adopted, if it's in there, it's gonna be on your guys' mind. You don't have to, I mean, council doesn't have to approve it. You guys can, you know, recommend not to approve it and state why with the inconsistency of the land use plan, all this stuff. But at the end of the day, it's not gonna happen unless it gets approved a part of a specific rezoning. And yes, people change on boards, people change on council, and that's then where you tie it back to land use planning and that future land use plan, the Heritage District specific plan, and you go ahead and try to get some of that really finite in there because it does, that's the vision guide.
So so for my own peace of mind, I'm okay leaving it in as long as there is a plan for all of us to get together and actually like, or you present the small area plan, but like, to me, like I would want input on that small area plan because I live in that area.
It kind of is, and Rick may need you to reword or correct me on this. It is because of the way that the goals and recommendations in the land use plan are worded. Townhomes technically would be inconsistent with those plans. Doesn't mean it still can't get approved, but that is kind of where it's at right now. So, and when things are inconsistent, that's what you guys are reviewing. I mean, we're going to get to the statement of consistency for this whole document here in a sec, but it's like you would state that it's inconsistent with transitional zone, I mean, all those goals and recommendations of the land use plan. And, you know, the council's going to take that recommendation into consideration. And for the most part, like I said, unless we update the land use plan for it to be kind of consistent or kind of plan out those areas on what we're thinking long-term, then it's a long shot. But having it in here at least sets us up where as times change and things change, it can be considered.
I'm just kind of curious, is there anything that could be put in place that would have those type of housing only in areas of area of commercial, retail, residential?
Well, that's what, it's only mixed use, yeah.
That was what it was. It's not standalone only
It's
in
it's
areas.
in the mixed use areas, the only one of the 4 where it could be done anyway.
Right, but I don't think there's any part of the Marvin Heritage District where it's like, it's be stuck out there as only those attached type that somebody would want to try to propose. Is that, if I'm not,
The- the-
Only residential only has already been,
Correct.
That's right.
but they're mixed use.
no, I mean, you know, you said just stuck out.
Well, if
But
it's,
the rest of the, and the issue is the rest of the mixed use is all bumps up against rural. So when you've
Right.
got higher density housing next to rural, that does not meet our transitional density, you know, qualifications in the land use plan, so.
But you could have a mixed-use district that has, and I said this last time, the neighborhood I live in, it's single-family, and then it's townhomes, and the townhomes are closer to the road. Like, that's, you could have a mixed residential-type development as part of a plan, and that's where you could consider that, where it would be maybe the larger lots type single-family residential detached housing, closest to maybe the rural residential and maybe townhomes more close to the roads or whatever. I mean, once again, that's just, it's a concept, it's an idea, it's nothing set in stone, it's
well,
just,
I agree with you, that would be the purpose of us getting together and really, if anything, reared its head to discuss in very detail about all that too.
That's where the conditional approval comes in, because that plan would be would be the key basis for those conditions. It would show or demonstrate where or how any of those things were if you were to approve them. If you don't approve them, they're not approved. You know, they're not carried forward as by right. That's the beauty of the conditional districts. And the way you've got your heritage district set up as a conditional overlay now, so that is it's going to be easier to say no, because you don't have to justify the no vote. Remember that. On any rezoning for anything, you don't have to justify the no vote. You only actually have to justify the yes vote to change. You justify change, not staying the
How
same.
much consideration, like, do you have to go if you want to do the no vote? I'm just wondering, you know, it's like if they come in, you know, they
Hey, I watched one the other night. No, 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 no. You
I
know,
mean, from like the very first proposal, listen to all of it and just go no.
just vote no, and they will find out very quickly where the heartburn is, and they may come back. Now, we've got a 4-month cooling off period in here before they can resubmit a rezoning on the same piece of property, which the council can waive and reduce that, which in a best-case scenario is going to get it down to maybe 3 months, because you still have to go back to the planning board, right? And so when they come back to the planning board, what's the heartburn? The heartburn is the townhouses. Well, we took the townhouses out. Here's our revised thing. Then it may move forward. Just-
and two
yeah.
things I want to mention too is, one, if a hypothetical application was submitted after this gets adopted for townhomes, one, they have a,
You kind of mumbled there for a second.
if a
Hypothetical
hypothetical
application was submitted
for rezoning
for
to whatever property, I don't know, I'm not going to pick on anybody in the Heritage District, but just a property in the Heritage District, and it had a townhome component. Well, the first step is they meet with me or staff, and get, for a pre-development meeting, kind of a pre-application meeting, and I can probably tell them right then, it's not a good fit, okay? They still want to move forward with it.
Well-
The second step is then, and I'm not, when I say it's not a good fit, doesn't mean that that's denying them. They can still propose it. The second step is in the neighborhood meeting.
That's when it's going to get attention.
Correct. And most of the time, most developers are not going to want to, well, really, push it. Like I said, I think I mentioned the case there in Huntersville with the guy that wanted to do that Laguna Bay project, all that stuff. That wasn't a good fit, got a lot of public pushback. He pulled the application before the public hearing. That's most likely what's going to happen in situations, and it may never even get to you guys if that was being proposed, just because they might, those neighborhood meetings and those public involvement meetings, those are important. They're important for staff to attend, to kind of see the gauge. It's important for the public to attend, and it's really most important and beneficial to the developer and the applicant itself, because that's where they're seeing where there, potential pushbacks. It happened with SEPSA. They had some, and they made amendments to their plan before it even got to you guys to go ahead and help try to mitigate certain concerns from public comment that was received at those public involvement meetings. So I just want to mention, I mean, like, you have the process is there. The process sets it up to where you're going to have a lot of public engagement, public information. Planning board's encouraged to attend those meetings, and so then when it comes to you, it's not the first time seeing it. And same thing with council. Council, every time there's a public involvement meeting scheduled, at their next meeting, I'd inform them, and they typically plan it out to where they go, and there's not a quorum, but at least they're there so they can either ask questions as a resident of Marvin, or even also as a elected official, gauge the interest of the public and see what's going on.
So, my charge is to have this ready for the village council for their May 14th public legislative hearing. We have legal notices going out fairly soon. Everything is sitting kind of on the cusp. If this board is not ready, then we can put the brakes on all of that and hold back until we get it worked out. Otherwise, what we actually need from you is a recommendation of this draft to go forward to the public legislative hearing, okay? And a consistency statement that goes with it. So that's the big fork in the road where we are right now. Is it staying in planning board's hands, or does it move on to the public and the village council's consideration?
Can we talk about the statement of consistency?
Yeah.
I think, does anyone have any, I mean, I've kind of monopolized with the concerns. Does anyone have any additional concerns, comments, questions before we go to the statement of consistency? John?
Well, I think there were, some of the proposed changes, no one has any problem with. A couple of those things. You had like 3, 4.
Yeah, we touched on them, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, are you going to change all the S's to P's?
Changing the S's to
So
P's,
that's
changing
done.
the
All right.
setback on the corner in the
I just didn't know whether
SFR1.
we needed to circle back.
And, that's right, and then I'm gonna have the symbol for the common open space, and the symbol over here more closely, the dashes look more the same there. That's can be tough, but we'll get that done. That's the 3 things that I have in my to-do list, and what I will be doing is emailing the replacement files for Article 8 and the official zoning map. Yeah, because it's just those 2, Article 8 and the official zoning map, which the only thing that's going to change, it's not going to change anything zoning on the table. It's only going to change that symbol that's in the legend. So there's no reason to, I don't want to have the newspaper have to reformat this again, because that's where we run into issues. If we misstep in that, it invalidates everything, okay? So, Madam Chair, if I may, I'm going to suggest that we not have the newspaper redo this proof, because that's so small, you're not going to be able to really tell it in a newspaper notice about yay big. The whole map has to be in there along with the words. So, but
Yeah.
it'll be on the one that gets uploaded and everything
Adopted,
else.
yeah.
Yeah, I would just say any map that neighbors have access to, that could, so whether it's online or if anything else gets printed,
Yeah.
like for
The
display
one that's,
in
Yep.
it'll be
in Village
online.
Hall, that it gets updated, because it's just a little confusing.
Yeah, and I mean, and for the record, for planning board or anybody listening online or the recording, if you have any questions about your property because you are confused, you can always either, 1, come to the public hearing, 2, reach out to staff, and be happy to make sure that your questions and stuff are identified or answered. But for the most part, nothing's really changing from what currently is being administered from a zoning map and district standpoint.
Is the hearing, so is the public hearing going to be a place where neighbors can come and actually ask questions, or is it really like, because a hearing is obviously it's a legislative.
A legislative public hearing is where, in all fairness to everyone involved, rather than getting into an exchange and trying to address that, because a public hearing is not about a question. A public hearing is about feedback. If they have a question, they need to call and say, hey, and if they then have a position to take and present to the council, then they would state it, because it's not fair to other members who have something to say if you get into a back and forth with Q&A on this. So public legislative hearings are where the village council hears all the comments, and they might say every now and then, well, we're not responding because we want to get all the comments in. We don't want to get into a debate or a discussion and 4 people finally leave because their babysitter's time is up or something like that.
Is there a way to do just a Q&A and, an FAQ? Is it,
So
you know what I mean? Like, is
staff's
there
preparing an FAQ. It'll go out next week once the council packets agendas are posted for the call for the public hearing. I can look into potentially doing, I'm not committing myself to this, I gotta look at my schedule, but an open house type thing one evening prior to the public hearing, where I'd be happy for anybody that wants to come in. I mean, similar to Coffee with Council, anybody that wants to come in, has questions on the NBO, I will be here and will answer questions. Can get questions, and if I can't answer them that night, I will make sure they will be answered during the public hearing. The other thing too is during the public hearing, as Rick stated, it's a chance for the public we're gonna do a presentation, correct?
Yeah.
We present first and then we open it up for public to get the comment. Most of the time, that presentation will answer their questions. If it doesn't, they can still ask those questions. I typically write them down, and before then it goes into council deliberation, I will try to answer those questions the best of my ability. Like, it won't be a back and forth, but I will at least try to clarify for any of those members of the public that have questions or concerns. But the goal is with the FAQ is to provide a general information on what the development ordinance is, what all it kind of consists of, why we did it, all this stuff. And if anybody has any specific questions, I mean, there's a lot in here. And I know people probably have questions because they look only in certain sections or only tuned into certain meetings and whatever. But, there's only so much we can do to make sure the public's informed. And if we want to do a public open house thing, I can talk with Austin and Christina on that tomorrow and see if we can potentially, do one. But it just depending on staff time, and I'm not going to ask Rick to come to that too. I mean, it's going to be something that I would just do and get questions.
Council members and, well, as long as we don't have a quorum, there may be a couple of us who would be willing to be there to help field questions, I mean, as best we can. But I do think getting ahead of, having Rick say publicly that there are certain aspects of this that, like with the gentleman's
Yes.
misinformed comment, like on.
That's part of my script that night. I know all those, not all, but I know the big
Protected class,
items.
like that kind of stuff, like, it just gets twisted and misused. And so having you there to say, it is against the law for us to do this, so. Yeah.
I have my little scripted opening. The first part of it for me will take about 10 to 15 minutes, because there are several things like that do, as you pointed out, they do answer a lot of the questions that the public will have. And those are natural questions, and I do this enough to where I've heard not all of them yet. I'm sure, well, I've heard all of them that I've heard. I'm sure I'll hear a new one. But I know kind of where to head off the preconceived notions and fears, and that's the biggest thing in my opening comments. Pardon me?
Or the troublemakers, because some people are just trying to stir the pot.
Yeah,
too, so.
well, you're going to have citizen number 1, 2, and 3 that are going to stir that up, and that's not unusual. And that's something that not you, but those guys, they actually went somewhere and signed up to make those final decisions when they filed for election. And that can be tough. That can be tough. I mean, I've seen some filibusters too. So, you're going to, in your public legislative hearing, if you've got a certain number of people, you're going to need to decide what is the comment period. You're going to give 3 minutes per person, or what is it?
Well, we need to clarify that it's comments and not questions.
That's right.
Questions Please do your
questions
homework.
now.
Yeah, I
Questions can
mean-
be asked anytime.
And that's why, I mean, at the joint meeting, and Rick, I try to hit on the things that I know or stirred around or any of that, because people do watch these meetings, people do come back and watch the recordings, and the more times we say it, the more we're like, look, like, we have went over this. Like I said, some people are gonna pick and choose on what they want to take out of any of these discussions. So,
Should be the things that we address in the FAQ.
yep, I mean, that's what after this meeting, I'm gonna go home and do, so.
Okay. Let us know if you need feedback or help
But
with it.
I think you bring up a good point. I will talk with some of the staff tomorrow, and I'll look to see if there is an opportunity to potentially just advertise a open house on this one evening prior to the public hearing, where staff and members, either the council or planning board, can be here to answer questions. And if we can, like I said, can't answer them, at least go ahead and get what those questions are so we can prepare for the public hearing. So, and
Public hearing again?
it
May
is
14th.
When is the
May
proposed?
14th, May 14th.
That's what we anticipate. That's the request of
Right.
council is to call it for
Still
that
interested
day. And we're kind of preparing everything around that.
And so this purpose, and I read through, anyone have any comments about the statement of consistency? It looks, I mean, it's fine. What about this, the purpose and authority official zoning map? So
That's just
you
up,
have to repeal the original zoning map for this new map? Is that?
Well,
this
it's
is-
the ordinance, the map is part of the ordinance. So your old map is part of your old ordinance. So all that, it gets replaced with the new.
So what is, so,
Rick, do we, on page 1 here, should we list out like chapter 150, 151 of the Marvin Code of Ordinances?
Well, we've got the dates that those ordinances were adopted.
Okay.
And that's, your code is not the ordinance. Your code is an organized place where your ordinances live. The law is actually the ordinance that was adopted. So we're repealing that. And
Okay.
then you would send, if you, if you want to have this one codified, I'm going to run the other
Nope,
way.
nope, you're
But my suggestion would be, there's a page that I'll give you
Yep.
that basically says, for this topic, go see this document.
okay, so, sorry. So this is the old document, and this language in yellow is what you're looking to update?
This is page 1 of our new ordinance is saying that this replaces those things.
Okay,
Those go away.
Thank you.
We've got to do that. We got to get that quote, unquote, off the books.
Yeah.
Now, it will be archived because there will be a need to keep it archived, because there are projects that developed under that old code. You may have to go back and refer to one at some point, for some reason or another, so I always recommend archiving. So, Madam Chair, there would be 2 motions tonight, if I can kind of summarize them. One of the motions for the statement of consistency would be quite simple, just a motion, second, and a vote. The second motion would be for the Marvin Development Ordinance with the 3 edits that have been addressed tonight. One of them to the side corner setback in an SFR1, one of them to the open space matrix in Article 8, and one of them to, actually, we don't even need to say that about the map.
Right,
It's really 2.
right.
That's just graphic,
Yeah.
a graphic correction. That's not change in policy. So it's really just those 2.
So Austin, are you updating the vote language as we look at you in your little screen?
I am.
And then there's not a second one for the
So-
statement of
Adding it.
consistency?
Yeah, though,
We had it originally as one motion together.
we had it to adopt it and in the motion and to adopt the statement. It was still it was one motion, but it was still two separate things. So it's, if we need to do two separate motions, that's fine.
All right, Austin, if you'll just let us know when you're ready, and we'll refresh our screens and see the language. And then, once that's done, if anyone would like to make the motion and then a second, feel free to do so.
Or, Rick, do you want them to do the statement of consistency first, or do you want them to recommend adoption first?
I would suggest the ordinance, the statute talks about following an ordinance with a statement of consistency.
Okay.
That does not make sense to me, but that's the order that the statute contains under an adoption and amendment of ordinances.
And do you want the motion to specifically specify in words those two changes, or do you want them to say as amended, as discussed?
I would say the two changes. I would say in Article 8, the amendment to the side corner setback for the single-family residential 1, or SFR 1, and to eliminate the special use permit requirement in the open space matrix contained in Article 8. I think that's general enough, or specific enough, I should say.
Hold on one second, I'm wordsmithing here. Okay, so in Article 8, the amendment to the side corner setback, I didn't catch the second half of that.
In the SFR 1,
In the SFR 1,
and the elimination of the special use permit requirement in the open space matrix for the Heritage District.
Heritage District. Okay. Almost there. All right, I am saving the new motions now. So those are now updated. So the two motions that I have is to recommend adoption of the Marvin Development Ordinance to the Village Council with the two changes in Article 8, the amendment to the side corner setback in SFR 1, and to eliminate the special use requirement in the open space matrix for the Heritage District. Does that sound good?
Would anyone like to make a motion to approve to send to the village council? Make it. Do you have the?
I don't have it in front of me.
Okay.
I recommend the adoption of the Marvin Development Ordinance to the Village Council with the two changes in Article 8. The amendment to the side corner setback in the SFR 1 to eliminate the special use permit required in the open space matrix for the Heritage District.
Do we have a second? All right. Will
Who is the
seconded.
second?
Will seconded.
Okay.
All in favor?
Okay.
Please say aye. All right, so moved. Coming
And
your
then you
way
have the
there, Bob.
second. And then you have the second motion to recommend the draft statement of consistency and reasonableness for the adoption of the Marvin Development Ordinance.
All right. I believe Will is going to be making this motion.
I move to recommend the draft statement of consistency and reasonableness for the adoption of the Marvin Development Ordinance.
Did you get that? All right.
We are,
Rich seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so moved. Thank you, everybody. Do we have a planner's update, or before we do that, Rick, are you going to be heading out? We wanted to say, or are you going to be
I
sticking
have a
around?
few
till the end of the
closing comments, if I may.
Yes, please.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to make a closing comment on this subject and this project. I just want to say publicly and to you as a group that you are an impeccable planning board.
Thank you.
You represent your town very, very well. Excuse me, it's not a town, it's a
The
village.
It takes a
And-
village.
And I work with a lot of boards around the state, and you are a very good board. You're rolling up your sleeves, you're putting the time in, you're doing your homework, you're commenting, contributing, you're challenging us, you're doing what you should do. And I want to commend you for that, and especially the chair for not letting us get too far ahead of ourselves. So, you know, my hat's off to you, Madam Chair. Our job is to help you to be able to advise your village council. So it's been a pleasure on my part. I will be, after this point, at least momentarily, I will be turning my attention to assisting staff and the village council in carrying out the remaining steps. I hope someday that I'm invited back, that they decide to spend, that a nickel is worth getting me back or something like that for some reason, because I really have enjoyed this project. I know we're not finished yet, but this does conclude this year-long session of rolling up our sleeves and digging in on a very large, very important project. So thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for selecting us to be your assistant in this, and my hat's off to you and your accomplishments, and I wish you well. I will be now turning in this direction.
Well, your guidance has been phenomenal. Your stories, okay. No, I'm just messing with you. I'm just messing
Well,
with
they're
you.
intended to put a little perspective on things.
I have enjoyed the stories as a storyteller, yeah. But I mean, I could not imagine having gotten through this without your guidance and your knowledge, and so thank you for all that you've done. I wish we had the money to send you out to every municipality to have and have their stuff fixed. So, and I know that you've been a huge help to the staff because they have a ton to do, and there's just a small little team, and so
That's what we're here
having
for.
extra hands and
It'd be
brains.
great if you could pay for all the other towns' work too, yeah.
I'll work on it, I raise money for a living, so, but thank you sincerely, so,
Thank you.
yeah. Hunter.
So, not much on planners update. The Heritage of Marvin has began construction. So that will be ongoing with the initial land development of that subdivision. Other than that, outside of the ongoing subdivisions that have already been approved and under construction, we're kind of, after this project wrapping up next month, we'll probably start discussing plans, as well as any other applicable potential applications that come across. But I'd like to thank you guys. I know this was a long process. Like I said, I've always said, I wish we could have done this about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But
you guys, you asked for it, and that's like the first step. So just the fact that you made it happen is phenomenal, so.
and like I said,
And thank
this is
you
a-
guys
yeah.
for approving the funding, because you guys clearly hired the right people.
Yeah, this process, all that we now have once it's adopted, we'll have these tools. Zoning ordinances are supposed to be a living document. They're supposed to be reviewed, looked at, updated, amended, and I already know that like I said, we're gonna probably come back to that Heritage District and kind of clean it up. But the tools are there, and so that's luckily why I wanted to go ahead and get all this adopted, because it helps staff and it helps everybody, in my opinion. And as we make those changes to the Heritage District, like I said, the process is what it's protection. So if there is any gaps or stuff that still was weird in those, we don't have to approve it. So, that's what's gonna be coming down the line, starting next month,
Cool.
so.
I don't think we don't have any action items, but I will request, if Austin can still hear us, or
I can.
if you guys do end up putting, let us know if you want a second pair of eyes for the FAQ or need help, and if you end up doing that kind of open house where people can come and ask questions.
Yeah, I'll look,
If you'll just send out the date so that if any of us are going to show up, where Austin can let us know if we're going to end up having a quorum and make a statement, put the notice out.
Bob, what's your thoughts on, I mean, I still want to consult with Christina and all sit and look at just calendars, but do
It'll
you,
be pretty short notice. You actually
yeah,
get
I
it-
mean, but
Get it out.
is there any legal requirements for just doing it? I mean, because it's not required, so I mean,
It's not a legal hearing, there's no additional requirement.
so if we
Only thing you
scheduled
wanna
it,
issue is a quorum notice if there's gonna be a quorum of a board there. My only concern would be having enough time to adequately, advertise this to the public.
yeah, that's why I would want to have this finalized tomorrow if we're going to do it, and without looking at a calendar, it would be the week before the hearing, so the week of, I don't know, May 7th. So I'll know, let me consult with staff tomorrow, and if that's something we'll probably post that on social media and stuff, and just get the information out there, so then if people do want to attend, they can.
Cool. Thank you. Let's go around Bob, you want to start?
No, I think it's been a great process. I'm just glad that we got this done. I feel really secure, and the questions that we're asking are still ahead of us. At least we know how to grapple with them, I was thinking about when you were talking about the amphitheater, and I was thinking about amusements, and I was looking under amusements, and I said, what if somebody came up and decided I wanted to put a Ferris wheel on that corner? How would we address that? What would we be able to do? Well, the total
Only
picture.
if we all got an unlimited amount of rides. And at the top
But-
of that was a cell booster.
But it's
so
almost
that we
like
could get
going-
cell
it-
service.
It would be almost like not stressing out about it, go back to the land use plan, and where was our original goal? Did we want a Ferris wheel? And just because we have a place that lists amusement doesn't mean we have to recognize that. We can kibosh that, so it's, I think it's kind of exciting to see what's going to happen.
I do think your point is, and I've been kind of harping on you guys for a while, that you got to get ahead of the stories that come out, and that is what we all need to be talking about, is just because it's there does not mean that it's allowed, or that it is, in a district that we even have. So that's really, I think, that we all need to read this FAQ once it's out, get it in our mouths so that we can start, if people do come to us and start asking questions, we're all consistent with our answers, so, and accurate. They'll just make stuff up. Will. I'm just kidding. Just messing with you. Marcus?
No, this has just been very enjoyable for me. I now feel like as one of the newest members of the council, I'm sorry, the planning board, don't think anything. Yeah. Now I feel like I have a Bible. I feel like I'm armed with the information. It's been very intuitive for me because I apply what I've seen on the West Coast to what I'm seeing this surge here, and it's so applicable, and as you said, it's so needed because we don't know the future, but yet we want to protect the current situation and circumstances we have. And it feels like the city is, intruding on our space, and now we have the tools to either push back or say yes or allow change. And I think that's a huge accomplishment, and it puts us way ahead, I think, of some of the other city planning boards in preparation for the future. So I've enjoyed it. I feel like I'm armed now. I feel like I have my little Bible to have intelligent conversation with now, so.
Nothing more for me.
Of course not. You never have many words, but then when he does speak, it's like, that's supposed to be an 84. We're gonna start calling you Mr. 84. Yeah, we appreciate it. We appreciate it.
I have to say that this year didn't seem like a year that we've been going through all these different articles. One of the things that I did say to one of our neighbors, and I actually wrote it down here, is that due to the potential impacts of these uses, certain additional standards were necessary to ensure that they do not adversely impact neighboring uses or the community as a whole. And I think all of us have been going through that each and every time that we're here, that we discuss it, we talk about it, what would be the negative impacts. And we've done a great job. I do have to say that Rick had given us tremendous information and wonderful insight. Very interesting what the GS statute has to say, but still, working with you all has been a privilege. I mean, this has really been great, and I'm thrilled to be able to stand behind this and print on my Bible, Marvin, because I think this is going to be a great document. So thank you, staff and Bob and Planning Board. It's been great.
Yeah, I mean, I know you seem to have said it feels like it's been a long time, but like, compared to the land use plan that we went through when I first started, I mean, a couple of us were here then, this felt like no time at all compared to that. So, yeah.
We didn't have any guidance for the land use plan.
I know. That's why this was so much easier than that. Yeah.
No, echo everybody's thoughts. I agree. Rick's been great. It's only us. Rick's been
No,
great.
it's still recording.
Thank Hunter, Austin, everybody, council for bringing this to our attention, and go from here. Thank you.
Just very happy that I was able to be a part of it with Rick, because he was very informative. And I've got a lot of toolboxes at my house. I'm never look at them the same after this year. Just wish I had the manuals to use them as I do now with this.
They're online.
But yeah, this is going to help, I think, the Village of Marvin make sure that whatever is putting forth in front of us is going to be done the best and right way to make sure we do the smart decisions. That's what I think. So I'm happy.
Well, you mentioned the land use plan that we inherited and we spent so much time on. This really has been needed for, well, 7 years, something, long before Hunter was here and stuff. And, and there was a lot of conversation, at least amongst staff and me, and I'm not even sure about council, but about, how do we fix all the problems that with the existing document? And then finally, do we start all over again? Do we go through it piece by piece? And it's excellent that they decided to just start all over again, because there were a lot of problems in the old document. We could have been sued lots and lots and lots. But, so it's great to see this.
Would you like to say anything, my dear?
It's been a pleasure working for you all.
You're not going anywhere, though, right? Okay.
So far. With
So
this
far,
project.
okay. That sounded like, I'm out.
CV experience.
Last thing I just want to mention, keep these binders. Most like, once it's adopted, we'll probably print all clean copies, and so you guys can have it. You can bring it to these meetings if you want. But as planning board members, I mean, this is your baby, your Bible. So once it's adopted, we'll print full new copies of those articles and can replace them. If you want to keep any of your old ones, feel free, but that option's there if you guys want it.
And so I have two quick things. One, all the documents that we have from the past, the land use plan, can we bring them into you guys and have you recycle them? Because we still also have old binders and things like, okay. Well, yeah. The other thing is when this is approved, or if it's approved, I won't get ahead of myself, when will the new UDO be online so that it could be searched virtually?
So part of the, for the public hearing, once again, for any of the public listening, a copy of the full recommended drafts with the planning board recommendation draft date will be available here at Village Hall. We will also post the full recommended draft in the council packets for the public hearing. After that, if adopted, then I will merge it all and we'll upload it to our website. And then it'll be made available pretty much on the planning page where some of the other planning documents live, and it will be the development ordinance for, you know, the public to, I don't know, use.
Okay, cool, thank you. Well, thank you, everybody. I'm get a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
All in favor? Oh, no, wait a second, sorry. Second. All in favor? All right. Bang, bang, set the gavel.
Thanks, Austin.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
Austin, I hope you feel better, bud.
I'm feeling pretty good now.
Go to bed.
Y'all have a good night. Hey, Paul, I mean,